Hi, and welcome to our first lesson. This is a review of operations on fractions, so we'll be doing adding, subtracting, multiplying, and dividing. Okay, and to get an idea of what's actually happening, we're going to draw some diagrams. So in our first one, we need a diagram for a half plus a quarter. So there's our half, there's our quarter. Notice the easy way to add these together is make all the slices the same size. So if I cut that first pizza thing in half there, I say I have 2 quarters plus 1 quarter is going to give us 1, 2, 3 quarters. So that's going to equal 3 quarters. Okay, next guy, we've got 1 2/3. So there's a whole pizza. There's 2/3 of a pizza, and then we're going to add half a pizza. Okay, and if we're going to make these all the same size slices, make them out of 6 slices. So notice this is how, basically, this is what we're doing when we get a common denominator, is cutting everything into the same number of slices. So in this case, we have a whole pizza and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 slices. So that's going to be 2 whole pizzas and a 1/6 of a pizza. So it's going to be 2 and a 1/6. Okay, and we just talked about the common denominator being the number of slices. Okay, so using the subtraction ones here, let's just do our kind of standard common denominator thing. Notice for our first one here, our common denominator is going to be 6. So I'm going to multiply my second fraction by 2/2, which is the same as multiplying by 1, so it won't change the value, but it will cut it up into more slices. So I get 5/6 minus 2/6 equals 3/6. And of course, that's the same as a half. Okay, and next guy, got 2 3/4. And I'm going to multiply that by 5/5, so I get a common denominator of 20. And multiply that by 4/4. So I'm going to get 2 and 15/20 minus 1 and 16/20. So if we look at the 15/20 and the 16/20, basically that's going to give me negative 1/20. 2 minus 1 will give me 1, so I'll have a whole minus a 20th will be 19/20. The other thing you could do there is, if you don't want to think about it that way, you can change this into an improper fraction. So 2 whole pizzas would be 40 slices. So that's going to be 55 slices over 20 minus 36 slices over 20 will still give me 19/20. Okay, let's have a look at some diagrams for multiplying. And this time it asks us for rectangular diagrams. So I'm going to start out with a third. So there's my third. And anytime we have times, that's like saying half. So we're going to have a third and then need a half of that. Or we can think about it the other way around, doesn't matter. So I'm going to do half of that, which means I've got half of my third is going to be there. So that's going to be 1/6. Okay, and again, I'll start out with 4/5. So that's 1, 2, 3, 4. So there's 4/5. And then I need 2/3 of that. So that's going to be that's going to give us 8. over, and there's 15 squares in that. So notice that 4 times 2 is 8, 5 times 3 is 15. So your smaller rectangle is going to be your numerator times numerator, and your larger rectangle will be denominator times denominator. And that's our general rule for multiplying fractions. Said more simply, we basically just have top times top over bottom times bottom. Okay, so let's have a look at these guys. Notice that if we have a mixed fraction, we need to turn it into a proper first. So this is going to be 3 over 4. It's a bit messy. It's going to be 3 over 4. And then 1 4/5. Well, we're going to have 5 slices in a whole. So 5 plus 4 is going to be 9 over 5. So that's going to give me 27 over 20. Okay, next guy, same thing. We got 3 wholes, so that's going to be 15, so that'll be 16 over 5. And that'll be 1 times 3 is 3 slices in a whole. So that'll give me 5 over 3. Notice that eventually this is going to be 16 times 5 over 5 times 3. So we can look at 5 over 5 as the same as 1 over 1. And we end up with 16 over 3. Okay, let's draw some diagrams now to think about division. Alright, so start with some really easy ones here. 8 divided by 2. I'm sure you drew pictures of that at some point in your school career. So we'll start out with 8 things. 1, 2, 3, 5, 6, 7, 8. One way to divide by 2 is to divide it into 2 groups. And of course that gives us 8 divided by 2 equals 4, which we already knew. The other thing we can do is divide it into groups of 2 and see how many groups we have. And again, of course, that gives us 4. Okay, let's have a look at 5 divided by 2. Well, if I'm going to divide this into 2 groups, I end up with 2.5 in each group. The other thing I can do is break it up into groups of 2. And notice I've only got half a group of 2 there at the end. So that also gives us 2.5. Alright, 3 divided by a half. Okay, well there's our 3. So the first one is to divide it into, and the last one we divided into 2 groups. So the first one on this one is we need to divide it into half a group. So if 3 is half a group, then a whole group would be 6. Probably an easier way for you to think about it. Here's our 3, and we break it into groups of a half. So there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 groups of a half. Okay, so there's a visualization of 3 divided by a half. And now let's have a look at a third divided by 2. So there's our third. And we need to divide this into groups of 2. Well, there's our whole group of 2. And how much of that group do we have? Well, we have 1 slice out of 6. So that's going to be a 1/6. The other way is easier to think about, where we're going to take a third and divide it into 2 groups. So there's our 2 groups. Each one has a 1/6 each in them. Okay, and at this point I'm sure you remember that, for example, in example C, 3 divided by a half is the same as 3 times 2 over 1 gives us 6. And a third divided by 2 is the same as a third times 1/2 equals 1 over 6. Okay, so you remember you need to invert the second fraction, take the reciprocal of it, and change it to a multiplication. Okay, so let's have a look at some of these here. So we got 2/3 divided by 3/4 is the same as 2/3 times 4 over 3 equals 8 over 9. This guy we need to change to improper first. So that's going to be 7 over 4 times 7 over 3. Oops, sorry, divided by 7 over 3. And that's 7 over 4 times 3 over 7. 7 over 7 is the same as 1 over 1. So we get 3/4. Okay, so that's the end of our review on fractions. Because this is pre-calculus, and eventually, if you want to have a look at some of the videos in Chapter 7, we'll be solving equations with x's and y's on the tops and bottoms of fractions. So if you can't do regular number fractions, you're not going to be able to do ones with variables in them. So I'm going to be expecting you guys to use fractions throughout the entire course so that when we get to Chapter 7, you'll be fine.